Hey YouTube, Tyler here, and I'm here to talk to you about Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple recently died at the age of 84, but she passed away peacefully in her woodside home next to her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So, at least it's peaceful, and that's something that I'm thankful for. If you guys don't know, Shirley Temple was the biggest childhood star in all of cinema history. She was more photographed than the president, FDR at the time. She was a star. But then she grew up, and as a young adult, she did not have a very successful career. So she stopped acting, ended up getting married and having a normal life, and then decided to go into politics, went to become a Republican candidate for a position of a representative, did not end up getting elected, so eventually became a diplomat for Czechoslovakia, I believe. And that brings me right to my point. And I came across this article in the Independent Journal Review called, and I have to do the voice, Rage Explosion! Left hosts Twitter hate fest for deceased Republican. Fuck Shirley Temple. So, already offensive. I absolutely have to read this. And you know what, there have been a ton of these articles lately, and they're very entertaining. I've actually done 2 vlogs on it recently, and it amazes me how much keyboard courage people actually have, because we all know that those people wouldn't actually say those things in person, at least to someone's face, that they were talking shit to. Like, these people wouldn't say this to Shirley Temple's face, obviously. But, okay, first one. This one's pretty entertaining for 2 reasons. I'll tell you in a sec. It says, saddest part about Shirley Temple dying. I learned on Wikipedia that she spent most of her post-acting life working for the Republican Party. Number 1, why is that sad? Why does that even affect her life? And number 2, you looked to Wikipedia for information? Alright. Next post, it says, well, Shirley Temple was a Republican. Next. Come on. An old lady who was like a cute child star, really? Okay, this one. 20 years from now, most of the Republican Party will be dead. Shirley Temple was just another old conservative who can't vote. She can't vote now because she's dead, so, ooh. Alright, yeah, so there's this one thing that bugs me more than aggressive people is passive-aggressive people on Twitter. And this tweet is, sorry, but not sad that Shirley Temple died because she became a conservative nutbag. What? Alright, 2 more. It's sad whenever someone dies, but Shirley Temple was an anti-choice Republican who wanted to abolish welfare. I can get to that in a bit, but it makes you cringe. And then last one. Rest in peace, Shirley Temple, an iconic image and brand as a child star, but marred in adult life by her unfortunate right-wing conservative tendencies, or right-wing Republican tendencies. Okay. That's that. Let me get right into it for you guys. Now let me tell you guys that you as a nation, America, is completely blinded by this left-right paradigm. And if you're watching on this video, this left-right paradigm. And now, just to point out a little bit of history for you guys about both parties. The Republican Party was started by Abraham Lincoln. The Democratic Party started the Jim Crow laws. And if you don't know what the Jim Crow laws, you should look it up. Try Wikipedia. Other really fascinating things. The Republican Party was against the Jim Crow laws. The Republican Party, you know who else was in the Republican Party? Martin Luther King Jr. was a Republican. So that just goes to show you that there are ebbs and flows to political party tendencies. Now, I'm not saying I agree with the Republican Party right now, but I'm also not saying I agree with the Democratic Party right now. It's because of this reason that I support independent parties, regardless if I believe in their ideas or philosophies or not. I support the idea of there being more ideas out there. Me personally, I'm an independent, but I have libertarian beliefs. But I don't agree with everything the Libertarian Party says or does, so I don't consider myself a libertarian. Further, we like to think of America of having such great choice, but if you look at who paid for the presidential candidates of 2012, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney both were paid for by the same corporations. If you watch the debates, for 3/4 of the questions, Mitt Romney is saying to Barack Obama, I agree with you, but this is what I would do differently. It only changed like one little thing. Okay, so backtracking a little bit. Comment about pro-life and anti-welfare. Okay, so there's 3 different philosophies that are really major in the political world right now. One is are you pro-life or pro-choice? And that is the hardest one to deal with. Another is the economic philosophies, Keynesian economics versus Austrian economics. And the last one is oh, well, if you're going to go this route, it's First Amendment when it comes to religious choice versus gay marriage. So, let me just explain my beliefs really quick. I believe that marriage, although may have been created by one religion, the rights that the government grants people for getting married should not mean that different people, different sexual backgrounds should be excluded from those rights. And further, that First Amendment is really clear. There's religious freedom. So if someone's atheist, are we going to tell them they can't get married? If so, if the answer is no, then why are we saying no to people who are homosexual? Second, to really talk about the Shirley Temple stuff, let's talk about economic philosophy first. Shirley Temple was against welfare because of the ease of how easy it is to abuse the system. Although I do agree there are very many people who are on welfare. I've heard dozens of stories of people who have been abusing the system, and people who are close to me, and people who do make a lot of money and are still on welfare, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but there's a radio interview you guys should listen to, and it's linked to in the description. I personally think that if you're on welfare, you should be doing some sort of community service or volunteer work unless you are physically unable to. Otherwise, you're getting money for an economic situation. And right now, 1 in 7 Americans are on welfare instead of... so the government's investing in people without jobs instead of investing in jobs to get people paid money so they can make more money than they would make on welfare, and that they would produce more jobs. Because my economic philosophy is Austrian economics, which means you should have the American people working, and which means that you should have the dollar as strong as possible, meaning you shouldn't just print money to give money to people who aren't working. Does that mean I hate poor people? No. That means I want a strong economy so there can be less poor people instead of people dependent on the government for money. And someone who's progressive or liberal would say to me in that case, well, what about corruption and abusing capitalist system? Well, you support a bigger government, right? And you don't want corruption? You realize the government is almost $20 trillion in debt, which means we were all born with like $30,000 in debt that we will probably never, ever, ever be able to pay off at the rate our economy has been going. And you still want more government? I mean, it's a philosophy. I mean, I'm just trying to show you guys this is what I believe. Okay, and for the pro-life, pro-choice issue, it's very tricky. That's why it's the hardest one, because one belief is that it's a woman's right to choose. It's her body, and it's her right to choose. To play devil's advocate here, I'm going to say, well, what about the body of the fetus? And I'm just going to refer to Roe v. Wade, and I think Roe v. Wade is very close to how it should be in our legal system, because Roe v. Wade is the fetus is a part of the woman and doesn't live its own individual life until it can sustain itself outside the womb, which is 3 months. Me personally, I feel like if you waited 3 months before you decided to have an abortion, you've waited too long. And some people would say, well, there are certain circumstances, like it's gonna turn out deformed, or it's gonna they can't afford the baby. My two responses to that are put it up for adoption or take care of it. I mean, that's if they're deformed. Take care of it or put it up to adoption. If you can't afford it, there's still no reason why you can't have the baby. I mean, foster parents, you know. Now, I do absolutely agree that if you're raped, then yeah, I mean, Plan B or abortion is absolutely an option. But come on, you know, 3 months of pregnant. If you missed 2, maybe 3 periods, that's 90 days of pregnancy before you've decided to, you know, abort. You have that big a window. I think it should be, personally, I'm not a woman. I know feminists are going to go after me for this, and I'm sorry, feminists. I'm sorry, women, if that's offensive to you, but I really don't think that's offensive. I think it's offensive to fetuses who get killed at 2 months and 29 days. For that to be our current legal system in a lot of states. But all those things I brought up in topic and discussed and talked about all in defense of Shirley Temple, who I personally think is a champion of peace and had wonderful ideas, was outspoken, was a very happy person who spread a lot of love and joy, and does not deserve any of this criticism for having her own philosophies, especially 50 years ago where the Republican Party was completely different. Wasn't the neocon warmongering party it is today. I personally think the Republican Party was much better than it was 50 years ago. I also think the Democratic Party was much different than it was 50 years ago. I think both parties have become extreme versions of themselves. Republican Party, which was generally pro-defense, have a strong military, is now pro-war. Pro-intervention. And the Democratic Party is very socialist, but not like what you think socialist. The idea that capitalism is terrible and capitalism hurts people. Well, socialism hurts people too, especially if you're $20 trillion in debt and can't afford to feed them. There are certain countries that socialism is very successful because they have a strong economy. Switzerland and Sweden, a lot of Europe, countries that aren't in debt, I mean, it's doing okay. But communism is not a good thing. Soviet Union, breadlines, never ever a good thing. Anyways, that's it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, before I let you go, please be respectful of other people's beliefs. Yes, it's okay to be angry at someone for saying something absolutely outrageous or doing something completely uncalled for. But for someone to simply have beliefs that aren't yours doesn't mean that they are a terrible person. And it doesn't mean that they were crazy. It just means that you aren't open-minded enough and are ultimately stunting your own growth. And if you want to chat about it, spot me a comment. I would love to comment this up. And only if you've made it this far in the video. And if you haven't, I'm sorry, you missed out. That's it for me. Keep it locked.